Yo, Joe, make a saving throw! Oh, crap. Jay here with Nerd Rage Against the Machine, and today we're going to be talking about the G.I. Joe role-playing game by Renegade Studios. This is the first time that G.I. Joe has officially been released as a role-playing game, as a genre. Renegade Studios has recently got the rights to do all the Hasbro properties, and we'll get into that in a second. And just to let you know, this is also a game that I purchased personally. Renegade did not send me a copy. This is not a comp copy, so everything I'm saying here is not based upon any freebies or anything like that. Saying that, let's start with some of the aesthetics. The game itself is beautiful. It is genuinely a gorgeous product to look at. The art is really well done and really well designed. Now, the one thing is the aesthetic of this game is based upon the console game G.I. Joe Operation Blackout, and which is the same aesthetic you see in the G.I. Joe classified toy line. So, you know, it's going to be like that. So if you really like that aesthetic, it's going to continue here. If you hate that aesthetic, don't know what to tell you. You're gonna hate the way that the book looks, I guess. So a little bit of a history. Renegade Studios has been around for a little bit. They've done some other RPGs, notably Kids on Bikes, which I think is a really good game. They also have the rights to the distribution of both Vampire the Masquerade and Werewolf the Apocalypse, the old White Wolf games, the newest editions of those. And now they've gotten into bed with Hasbro. So the way that this works is that Renegade Studios apparently has a license with Hasbro to do all of their properties as RPGs, which I gotta say is kind of weird. Hasbro owned Wizards of the Coast, which owned TSR, the guys who created Dungeons and Dragons. So I've always wondered, especially when that acquisition took place in like the early 2000s, why not, or 1990s, early 2000s, something there, why not leverage those properties? I mean, let's be fair, people who play RPGs tend to be the kind of nerds who also might collect action figures. And Hasbro has done this already in reverse. We already have a Marvel Legends-esque Dritz Du Erden action figure for D&D fans. It even comes with its own D20. I've also seen D&D My Little Pony figures. You know, like My Little Pony characters dressed up like as different classes in D&D. So, I mean, obviously Hasbro knows that there is a market for toy collectors and gamers, that there is an overlap of some kind. So instead they went to Renegade Studios. Renegade Studios got the license, and they're doing both, not only the G.I. Joe RPG, but they're doing Transformers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and My Little Pony. So for those of you who played the original My Little Pony RPG, Tales of Equestria, it is now going to be replaced with a version from Renegade. And to let you know, Renegade Studios is using a system called Essence 20. Essence 20 is a boiled down modified version of D20. So there's a lot of similarity to D&D mechanically. Unlike D&D, there's only 4 stats: strength, stamina, smarts, and speed, if I'm not mistaken. And each of those has about 5 to 6 skills under it. When you're building a character, you get 12 points, at least in G.I. Joe. That may be different in other games. But you're a level 1 character. You start with 12 points to distribute between your stats. Whatever points you distribute in a stat is how many points you have for skills within that stat. So if you spend 3 on strength, you have 3 skill points to spend in strength skills. If you spend 2 in smarts, again, you have 2 skill points to spend on smarts skills, which is cool, and it's easy, it's well designed. Now, the stat numbers don't give you a modifier like they do in D&D. Instead, they add 2 difficulties against. So basically the answer to armor class if you will. On top of that, the stats or the skills are also not numbers, they're additional dice. So, for example, my character might have a D4 accuracy or marksmanship skill, as opposed to, in traditional D&D where I might have a +2 listen. I would also, again, have a D6 or D4, what have you, of perception skill. The systems for character creation are pretty easy. They're pretty decent. I went ahead, the first thing I did when I got this is I tried to build a character. I was building a saboteur, basically the G.I. Joe team equivalent of Firefly, the Cobra saboteur. And the system itself works pretty decently. You start as level 1, and there are, just like Dungeons and Dragons, there's like 20 levels. This is one thing that kind of caught me off guard, is like Cobra Commander is considered a level 20 threat. And to me, I kind of found that weird because, again, I don't think of Cobra Commander as a badass combatant as much as a, perhaps brilliant tactical leader, highly charismatic, but not the kind of guy you'd be as afraid of in an actual fist fight or fire combat fight. But that's how they want to do it. That's on them. This is, again, if you're looking for hyper-realistic, hardcore military stuff, I'm going to really suggest Twilight 2000 before I would suggest this. As an example, there are no actual weapons in here that work the same way. Like, you don't have like stats for an Uzi, stats for an MPK5, stats for an M16. What you instead have is classifications like submachine gun. When you're building your character, you have choice of 1 to 3 backgrounds, which gives you boons and flaws. You then go on to or origins, I should say. Then you go into backgrounds. You pick a background of what you were before you joined the Joe team, and then you pick a class. Yes, a traditional style D&D class that will be your then what you go up. So in my case of my Firefly-esque character, I built whose name was Breakdown. Breakdown was a commando, which is the same as, of course, you know who, and Scarlet and several others mentioned. The game works well. The only real gripe I have is, much like D&D, there are so many feats, benefits, advantages, flaws that need to be kept track of that you're going to be referencing this thing a ton of times to remember, what does this do for me? What does that do for me? I have this special ability. Where the hell is that again? Which can, of course, like anything else, bog down play. Now, to say that... I get it. That's really where your flavor for these characters comes from, and if you're used to D&D, you're probably used to that already. But it's just something I think is worth mentioning as probably the biggest slowdown factor in this game. Again, mechanically, everything is dice based. You also have the roll with advantage, roll with disadvantage mechanic from 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. It works well enough from what I've seen, but again, it is very much, you can still feel that D&D flavor somewhere baked into there. And from what I understand, all of the Essence 20 or all their Hasbro based RPGs will have that same system. So don't expect Transformers to be radically different from that, or My Little Pony to be insanely different either. They are planning a lot of support for this game. There is already a GM screen. There is a miniature set coming, and I can see, if I were going to run this is one that, definitely have the boards out and the tactical grids, and probably be printing up some, 28mm scaled vamps and APCs and HISS tanks and the like to really pepper up the battlefield. In fact, speaking of the special abilities, one I thought was kind of funny in the book is that everyone gets Battle Cry if you're a member of the G.I. Joe team. And that is that at the start of a battle, if you cry, "Yo, Joe!" you get a +10 movement, or +10 feet of movement, which is basically 2 squares. Kind of cute, kind of cool. There's other things it does for you, but that's the one that kind of stuck out to me. The game is $50 in this hardback edition, and like I said, production value-wise, it's very nice. It looks like Renegade is planning on supporting it and its sister games pretty healthily. Overall, I'm going to say it's a 3.5 out of 5. It's not a bad game. It is good. It is above average, especially in its production values, but at the same time, it is G.I. Joe. And what I mean by that is this is a game of heroes. This is a game of bold morality, good versus evil, no shades of gray kind of stuff. Pretty much what you saw in the cartoon, what you saw in the video game, and most of what you saw in the comic books is gonna reign true here. If you're looking for gritty, realistic military RPGing, I could think of 3 other systems I would recommend long before I would touch this guy. Again, not that it's bad, just understand what you're getting into. Know the genre before you get into the game, I guess is the best way to describe it. And that's going to be true, I think, with all of the the SS20 games. So, again, if you're a G.I. Joe fan and really think the idea of role-playing in the G.I. Joe universe is worth doing, you could do a hell of a lot worse than this mechanic. You could do a hell of a lot worse than this system, and I think it's worth getting into. If the idea, again, is more realistic, you know, if you don't want scenarios where Cobra's decided to try to bring back Cold Slither as a band, this is, you know, this would not be the game for you. Understand that's the kind of scenarios and the kind of things that this game is going to be good at. It is a good game though, and it is worth trying, especially if you are interested in that, you know, in that genre, in that feel. It does a very good job of emulating that. Skills make you better. There's no such thing as penalties for not having skills. It's not a super lethal game. It is designed with the idea of heroism first, which, again, I think plays out well. So, what are your thoughts? Any interest in this game? Any questions about it? Feel free to hit me up in the comments below, and I'll be happy to discuss it with you. And in the meantime, I bid you adieu. Happy gaming, and of course, Yo Joe.